We are now ready.
Okay, welcome all to the November 18th, 2024 meeting of the Housing and Homelessness Committee. My name is Rich Mintz and I am the chair of the committee. Tonight, we are joined by Assistant District Manager Brendan Berth. This meeting is called to order at 6:35 p.m. As a reminder, New York state law requires all committee members who are not able to attend the meeting in person to have their cameras on and their first and last names displayed from the time the meeting is called to order until the time the meeting is adjourned. Members of the public attending virtually, you can raise any questions or comments that you have through the Q&A feature of Zoom. Members who are here in person, you can raise any questions that you have by raising your hand. If there's time following the committee discussion, we will field questions from the public. Alec has agreed to take minutes. Thank you very much. We will now take attendance by roll call. Roll call. Brendan will conduct the roll call.
Members, I will call your name. When your name is called, please say present. I'll announce if there is quorum. Kyle Lethai,
Present.
Eric Goldberg,
Present.
Nat Kalani,
Present.
Katie Landa,
Present.
Sandra Leftoff,
Present.
Yay.
Alec Militic,
Present.
Rich Mintz,
Present.
Olivia Shrednick won't be with us tonight. James Vera,
Present.
and Jerry Weinstein.
Present.
We have a quorum.
That's good. That's close to 100%. Thank you all for coming. We will now adopt the agenda, which you see on the screen. What I've proposed is that we have a discussion for 20 or so minutes about tactics to improve housing affordability and maybe make a plan to address some specific ones. And then we have one business matter, which is a proposal by DHS regarding the siting of homeless shelters, regarding notice. And then there's a couple of new business items to bring up. So if you object to the agenda as stated, please raise your hand. And seeing no hands raised, the agenda is adopted. The minutes from October's meeting are still being drafted. Once they are ready for review, they will be distributed to you. Now some ground rules in order to conduct an efficient meeting. Number one, no one may speak until granted the floor. Number two, committee members here in person, if you have a question about committee business or wish to make a motion, please raise your hand and I will identify you so that you can speak. Number three, committee members who are not attending in person, if you have a question about committee business, you may raise your hand through Zoom and I will identify you so you can speak. Number four, all committee members, it is extremely important that only one person speak at a time so that people watching at home can understand what is being said. Number five, the chat function for committee members present via Zoom should not be used for committee business. Remarks about business should be made on the record by raising your hand through Zoom. The chat should only be used to alert us to any technical difficulties or to state in writing information that is already stated aloud on the record during the meeting. So, as usual, I am going to promise to do this in an hour and possibly not, but we're going to try this time. And I had the office distribute some notes ahead of time regarding affordability. I listened to the recording from last week and pulled out some of the things that we said about affordability, and I did a little research. You saw that I looked for AMI information.
I'm sorry, I didn't get that. Was there a distribution of notes for this?
There was an email, it was attached to one of the reminder emails
Of today?
on Friday.
Oh, I'm sorry, I didn't get it. Is there an extra copy of that?
I don't have it printed out, but Brandon's going to put it up on the screen. So if you want to move to a seat where you can see, or maybe you
I
can
can
see.
see, I like
Okay,
to see
good.
this way. I like
Okay,
to
great.
Look around corners.
So just starting with the AMI cheat sheet,
Just
which,
a moment,
okay,
I'm pulling it up for people attending online.
he's getting organized.
Yes. Want to make sure people online can also see. There we go.
Yeah. So this is a kind of complicated looking chart, but it basically goes to something that Sandra raised earlier, I guess, in the summer, which is what's the AMI breakdown in the city in terms of the percentage of people at what income level? And one of the things you see on this chart is that our citizens are disproportionately on the lower end of the income side. Well, I mean, I guess that's not true. Like by definition, they're split, but we see like a third of renter households down below 30%. And our housing stock doesn't serve those people well. So that's one group of people that needs more attention.
Can I just say something
Yeah.
about the AMI? The AMI is a HUD
Yeah.
category. And the problem for the AMI in terms of representing New York City is that it includes Westchester County, so it's really all. And that's problematic. So what looks like the lowest 30%, in fact, it's lower than that.
That actually, that's true, and that explains why these numbers look tilted. It's because the New York City proportion is lower income on average than the Westchester portion.
No,
So-
but they, I don't know if they split it, but the AMI.
Well, this specifically is New York City, this chart, that's,
I've never
so
seen
they
it
pulled the New
before.
York City people, it's from ANHD,
Okay, that's good.
yeah. So, I just wanted you all to have this, so that you could visualize, what the AMI situation is. I pulled some thoughts out of our notes about, Brendan, if you wouldn't mind, can you switch to the agenda document? The Google Doc that you turn into a PDF, to send out with the notes, if you have it.
Just a moment.
Yeah.
I am confused about what the AMI represents because I thought it was just income, but the notes on that brochure say something about that it also incorporates market values of rent. So I don't really, I feel like now I don't
I
understand.
think it's just income.
It's just income.
That's what I
In New
thought.
York, there's a hitch, so they changed it.
Income.
Oh, there's an
There's a
adjustment in New York?
Yeah,
There's a note that
Oh.
says
The high
something
rents.
about adjusting it for the market rate
Yeah.
of rents.
Well, that's,
yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah,
You
that's
said
the
New York
first time
City,
I've
huh?
seen that, and
Yeah, I
I don't
understood that
understand.
There's actually a big article in the, I think, the New York Times last week about this very issue.
Oh, is that like 5-part series that
Yeah,
guy's
the
doing on
first
housing?
one, yeah.
Yeah,
The bridges,
Yeah.
this.
yes, that's what I mean.
Okay, excellent.
And if you would, will you scroll down to the first section where it says affordability is multiple problems?
Yeah.
So that is visible on the screen. Right there. I just wanted to ground the conversation in a set of different concerns that are not exactly the same, even though they overlap and make up part of the affordability situation. There's the question of having enough supply. There's the question of making sure that tenants who are in apartments are protected via whatever eviction and rent controls and limitations are enforced. There's a question, there's an issue of middle income affordability, people who make in the range of $100,000, which sounds like a lot of money, but isn't really in New York standards. There's a separate question of lower income affordability, where if you're making 40 to 80% of the AMI, like, if you're making $60,000 a year, you get into housing and you have to hold on to it for dear life because it's not going to be easy to replace. Can you scroll down to the second half of this?
Sure.
Then, well, no, I want to get 5 and 6.
Oh, yes.
So then there's very low income affordability, and that's an issue that the city hasn't really addressed well, which is one of the things that came up in our City of Yes conversations. If you make under $40,000, you basically have no housing choices, and it's not possible for you to live without some sort of subsidy, even either in terms of subsidized rent or in terms of either a subsidy on the landlord side or a subsidy on your payment side via a voucher, and we don't really have much accommodation for that. And then finally, there's homelessness, which is what happens when you are at the very low income point and you lose your housing and you can't replace it. So, you know, when we think about affordability, we need to think about all of these people. And with these in mind, here in this list of ways of impacting housing affordability, I pulled out some of the things that came up in our discussion last month, things that were mentioned in the course of our chatting about broader issues. And I wanted to raise the question here today about, are there 2 or 3 specific things here that we want to put some extra attention into over the next few months in terms of either pushing for policy, finding legislators that agree with us and seeing what they're supporting, or, you know, I don't know what. I want to leave it open. And I guess I will throw this, I'll stop talking and I will throw this conversation open and we'll see what comes of it. Yeah, go ahead.
So a thought apropos of this being my second meeting. I've been attending and participating with the relatively new Commission on Racial Equity.
Yeah.
And in trying to accurately define things like food security and housing, one of the things that we've looked towards are the tree communities. And like everything in the acronym is, it was the Task Force on Racial Inclusion and Equity that kicked off over COVID and identified 33 neighborhoods that were the most vulnerable, lowest income, hardest hit COVID. And I keep wondering, because we talked about this, whether or not that's another measurement apart from AMI to open up and use it as a way of dealing with what you pointed out, the most vulnerable people at under 40,000.
Yeah.
One of the issues seems like the city of Yes, which is, I don't know where it is in city council, maybe.
It's pending a vote in city council, yeah.
That's the place that that issue seems to, that's a serious place that issue has to get addressed. You know, the 30 or 40% folks that you were saying was never fairly addressed in the city of Yes. So that's one issue that we should, you know, make a clear statement. That's a problematic aspect. Because it's not affordable. I mean, the city of Yes housing is not an issue of affordability.
No, and they would say, our the impact of city of Yes on affordability will be medium-term impact.
Right.
But in the meantime, you know, we have whatever we have, like, you know, 400,000 households of rent burden in Manhattan.
Right.
Well, that can't be that much, but we probably have 300,000, 250,000. I'm just doing the math, like on the fly. So you're saying that we should pay some attention to people at the very bottom and at the bottom of the income scale, and make sure that we're advocating for them.
Right. Well, I'm saying that city of Yes housing, in my view, is a mistake because it was about increasing housing as opposed to, and affordable housing was marginalized.
Yeah.
And we approved it.
Yeah.
As we know, that was a very big touchy issue.
Yeah.
And we shouldn't have, because we didn't stick up for low-income people. So my view would be, you back up, write a statement to our, I guess, city council reps, whoever they are.
Yeah.
And say that we, in fact, highly question at this point the validity of that in terms of reaching out to the truly, you know, the low-income people of the city.
Well, the city council, Adrian Adams, not Eric, said that they wanted to pass a package of affordability measures alongside City of Yes. But I don't think that the details of that have come out. Maybe we should see what they're proposing.
Well, and I'm saying maybe we should also, I guess the more you advocate that issue as it's coming up for a vote, the more pressure you're placing on the city council reps to, you know, to think about what they're going to approve.
Yeah.
So,
I mean, I think we're too late though to influence City of Yes at this point.
we said that 6 months ago.
Because,
So,
I mean, you know,
So I disagree, but that's okay. I think you do what you have to do.
Yeah.
Or draw attention if they're in the middle of really, you know, duking it out or whatever the hell they're doing, so.
I think they're just horse trading at this point, yeah.
Yeah.
You shared with me some good cause
I have.
stuff today.
I have.
Oh, you,
It's funny you should mention that.
did you brought handouts?
I have to tell you, the wonderful thing about it, I'll
And
tell you what it's about. I did you, I won't expect you to read them and you'll be a quiz at the end of the usual.
I also gonna, just because it might be useful for the office with service requests.
Oh, you know what, here, I'm gonna do the keep one here, take the other. Oh, no,
I'll need
keep
that.
one to Sandy.
Oh,
yes.
Did,
Anyhow.
Yes.
So, actually, you know, I run this internship program and my students are in various housing places and one of them is in Senator Kruger's office. And so my student actually was, had a big, you know, she did a lot of the work on this handout, which is great. And it's the issues of what's going on in good cause eviction, what people should know. So there's really two issues. I put up aside from the quiz, which, you know, I'll do. But is that people don't know about it, right?
Yeah.
And so if you ask your friends, do you know what's, you know, good causes are? And so it's not really gotten much press, and
Mhm.
that is problematic. And apparently, so that's part one. The other part is if this was a horse trade or whatever you call it,
Yeah.
what they do.
Yeah.
And so I've been in touch with some of the government people who shall remain nameless. Anyhow, the point was, there was in the opposition, this really got there are lots of problems with it. I read it through. I could pick up a couple just on the quick read, but the person I've been in touch with has said there's serious problems with it. So one of the issues would be to find out what those problems are, see what we want to say about it, in terms of this really working. Right now, the way it works is, if your landlord does not, ignores the good cause eviction, and sends you a lease and you protest it, your option is housing court. Well, nobody really wants to go to housing court. So that's the first problem. Well, that's one of the problems. There are problems in terms, and you can read it when you'll see, but I'll give you examples. There are, condos and co-ops are excluded from this, which means that people who are buying condos particularly on spec, which I know, like in my building, at least half the building is, they don't, you know, they're just renting it out. There's no controls on that. That's a real problem because to me, it encourages speculation. The other one, and I have to explore it further, but it's for buildings that were built before 2009, which means that the city of Yes, if I'm following what's said.
Yeah.
The city of Yes housing, all the new housing is therefore not covered. That's a major issue
Yeah.
in my mind. And if that's true, we certainly want to oppose that. But it also says anything that's built after 2009 is excluded. And I don't know what the actual terms are. Again, I really got this last week and I'm just,
Well,
I don't think it's excluded permanently. I
well,
think
whatever it's.
Yeah, no, I was
excluded.
just saying, I think there's a phase-in period for builders to recoup costs, but
Yeah.
I'm not
No,
saying
it's
right or
fine.
wrong, I'm just saying, yeah. It's
But
not
that should-
aligned like with rent stabilization.
I guess what I'm saying is this all should be above board.
Yeah.
Right? The lack of transparency on that is not, to me, it's not acceptable. I don't know what the length of time, last time for the 421A, it was what, 30 years in which they didn't have to pay property tax.
Yeah.
That's a long time. And I don't even know if even the city of Yes, if they've got one of those deals. Again, I assume they do.
Yeah.
But so.
And can I just add one thing as you're saying it, because my understanding is that one of the, in theory, loopholes, and maybe it's the intention, is that good cause eviction is supposed to allow a current tenant to stay in their unit without unreasonable increases. But when that tenant leaves, you could charge anything for the new tenant coming in. The next,
that's
a turnover
interesting.
tenant is not bound by the good cause increases, because my understanding is the intent is to allow a current tenant to stay in their home.
but aren't they still bound by the rules, the vacancy decontrol limitations, if
That's
they're
for
rent
state-
stabilized?
It's stabilized,
Okay.
yes, so stabilized, so
Okay.
stabilized first market, yes.
But
Stabilized
that's-
is like 40%.
Yeah, but good cause to me is
Is meant for the other people.
right, is meant for market,
Okay,
right? Yeah,
So they
because
are-
otherwise, yeah,
That's a big deal.
yeah,
So,
I think,
no,
I'm
that
pretty
is,
sure.
so
Yeah,
I
that's
guess one of the
the loophole.
issues is finding out exactly,
yeah,
what is in it,
Yeah.
it isn't, it's gotta be,
yeah.
we need to know more.
Because it does create an incentive for a landlord to try and push someone out.
so it sounds like hang on just one second, it sounds like two things that have come out of this conversation so far. One is addressing affordability for very low income individuals. One is closing the gaps in good cause. Is there another topic on this list that someone feels strongly about? And I would just want to note, Jim Collins, I know your hand is up, and when we get to a stopping point here in the room, I will I'll call on you. We've got two hands up. I'll start with Alec.
To go back to the topic of AMI, I remember earlier in the spring this year, Councilmember Crystal Hudson, who represents a district in Brooklyn, proposed sort of an alternate way to think about AMI at a very local level. So she has priorities in her council district that she rethought of with the help of, I believe it's Hester Street. I was just on my phone trying to look to see the source. I can share with the committee leader, but it's a way that she's able to apply AMI, from my understanding, to her district. So that way there are different bands of affordability because, as we mentioned earlier, AMI doesn't account for things at the borough level or neighborhood level.
yeah.
So it's a much different way to think about AMI. So maybe it's a conversation that we could have with our local council members. See
Yeah.
if they've thought about maybe conversations that they've had with Councilmember Hudson. or
We should
even
see
ways in
what
which-
specifically that is. I would be very interested in hearing about that.
And actually, I could add something for the detail if you want, because I did just pull this up, if you're curious.
Yeah.
Maybe a minute, but it says, nearly every affordable housing program relies on AMI to set rents. Here's the problem. In New York City, the AMI has little to do with people's actual income. Put as simply as possible, the pricey rents in New York City trigger a federal scheme called the High Housing Cost Adjustment. So the AMI is calculated based on rents, not incomes.
That's what you were talking
And
about.
the reason why they're saying is because if you did it based on income, it wouldn't cover as many people. So like the AMI in the city region is $77,000. That would cover 50% of households. So they do it based on rents because rents are so high relative in New York, and the AMI is 129 in New York. So that then covers like 75% of households. The problem then becomes, though, if the AMI is higher, then the rental, the rent is higher as well,
Yeah,
right? That gets created. So they're not creating the rents off of the 77,000, they're creating it off of 130,000.
you mean creating the rents for income restricted
Yes,
units?
exactly.
Yeah, okay.
It's based on the adjusted AMI, not the
Yeah.
actual AMI. So it covers more people, but at a higher level.
I'm a little confused. Could you just re-explain?
It's
So
probably not so relevant, but I guess the headline is that in New York City, the AMI is not based on income.
But that's the whole definition of it. How could it not be?
Well, you can read this.
Actually, if you could forward that article,
Sure,
whatever it
yeah,
is.
I mean, the reason why is because they say that the rents are so out of whack in New York that if you kept it on the actual AMI, it would cover too few people.
Yeah, we should read it.
So you would be rent burdened, so meaning that like, even if you only covered it at 77,000, which is what the actual AMI is, the number of rent burdened people, still all the people in the gap between who make 77,000 to 130,000 are still super rent burdened in New York City because the rents are so high. So they want that class of people also to have access to affordable income restricted housing
Yeah.
that they wouldn't otherwise.
The problem though
So
is
it's a
that,
strange trade-off. I'm just saying that's
Yeah.
a trade-off. Yeah.
the problem is that you take units out of service that would have been available to people at the very bottom of the income scale, and you make them available for people in the middle. And those people at the
Right.
bottom, like you were saying, are.
And that's why you need more housing for people making 40% of AMI.
Yeah.
30% of AMI, and that's the piece that's not adjusting.
Mhm.
So I think the idea of having a higher AMI makes sense. It's just that they're not setting aside.
You need more volume.
Right, or at 40% or 30% of AMI.
Yeah.
Different way, different bands of.
Right,
AMI.
yes.
So what would be in that one, so what would be the AMI now for a family of three, I think is like 130,000.
Yeah.
Right? So what would be the AMI in this other system for a
It
family of
should,
three?
it should be 77,000 is what they're saying. The actual AMI in our area is 77,000. They adjust it to make it 130.
So they up it,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
And then they increase the rents. So all right, so they eliminate even more affordable units for
No,
the,
well, I guess depends how you look at it. For them, they're saying now more people, because you could make up to 130,000 have access to affordable units.
But because we're not creating more affordable units, that's more competition for the same number.
Yes.
and then
Yes.
the people who earn 40,000 are not, they have even fewer options.
Yeah.
Okay.
Well,
Right.
yeah, I
got
mean,
it.
potentially, yeah.
Okay.
All right, so that's something to look into. Hang on just one second. Your hand has been up.
Yeah, I just wondered if folks had discussed the city council's response, which is City for All Housing Plan.
That's what I was alluding to before, and I don't know the details of that. So we should look into that.
I can just cut and paste and send it
Yeah.
to you right now.
Yeah,
So it
So
starts with deep affordability.
that'll be an agenda item for me is to digest that and
Can you pass it, could you send it?
yeah, that would be
So
great
we
if you
can
could
all read it?
yeah.
One of the things is, it's really important that we all have access to whatever is,
Yeah.
whatever, so we can all be
Yeah.
part of that discussion.
Maybe
So
if you
we
give
can-
that to Brendan, he can distribute it to the committee. I would let you ask you to talk, and then I'm gonna call on Jim, and then I want to move the agenda, so we don't get
yeah,
stuck.
I'll be very brief. I think we're talking about getting into some very specific detail here. But just looking at this list, which is extremely helpful, I think number 6 before the ways of impacting housing affordability. The homelessness, which is hard to get out of. I think our priority should be being that last line of defense before homelessness takes hold of somebody.
Yeah,
Really kind of keeping that because the domino effect of becoming homeless affects a broader part of the community.
I agree with that, certainly.
Okay,
And Jim, I think it's time to promote Jim if he isn't promoted.
Yeah, I'll promote Jen.
Stand by.
Winning. Okay,
Jim, you're
Hi.
on mute. Hi.
Yeah. How are you? Hi, Rich. I was hoping to join you guys tonight, but something came up. As to the AMI, I would not also underestimate the fact that we are included with Westchester County,
Yeah,
because that does drive that number up quite a bit. And I don't know why there isn't some legislative fix for that. It's run by the Census Bureau, and it should be fixable, hopefully legislatively. I do take the point on the rents, but keep in mind that they're raising the rents. That, I mean, it sounded to me almost, and I just did the math in my head, it sounded like about an 80% increase. Based
So one
on
of our-
the rent. The rent
one of our
figure.
action items should be to figure out why it is that way, if there's a reason, and see if it is appropriate for us to push for legislative fix.
Yeah, I think what you suggested, like regional or the.
Yeah, I think I'll share that article in her, she has a whole thing on her website. I started going through it. I can share it with.
That's great.
later.
Thank you.
And maybe it's something we
Yeah,
can, our local.
and Brendan, if you can send it to me too, I'd like to see that.
Sure.
And the
Jim,
thing
you
that
had
we've
something
been
else
talking,
too, I think.
yeah, Rich and I have been talking periodically about means testing affordable housing so as to bring it down, make it more available to a wider population of residents of the city. It's what we're doing now is once you have qualified for affordable housing, you are basically in there for life until you die or voluntarily move out. And what happens is you get people who join not-for-profit organizations, right out of college. They go in at a low salary, and then 5-10 years later, they're making well into middle six figures after they've moved into, say, work as a lobbyist or work as a law firm or something of that nature, or investment banking house, and they're able to keep the affordable housing while they buy their condo out in the Hamptons, and that's just not right. We have we can means test it. We can check it against New York State income tax filings. And this is just something that should have been done long ago. I can remember raising this point, must have been 20 odd years ago, that this is an issue that needs to be addressed, because if you were to equate it to corporate welfare, that would be a good comparison.
I mean, look, it's controversial because the idea of depriving people of their housing is inherently controversial, but there are serious arguments for taking income into account over the long term in evaluating who is entitled to benefits, and I do think it's in our interest to look at the way other jurisdictions have addressed this, and not simply to dismiss it. So I'm gonna put it on the agenda for myself.
Yeah, as those articles that I sent you, there's a number of instances where people may have gone in and unfortunately been unemployed for a month or a couple of months, and their income for that particular year or that particular period was low, and then they step up. I mean, there was a stockbroker over in Chelsea that qualified for affordable housing, and now the guy's making mid six figures. So
there are definitely some instances of this, while most people don't fall into that category, there are a lot of people who fall into a middle category where they're paying a highly depressed rent, even though they could afford to pay something closer to market. And I am not personally advocating for anything here, but I am saying that I think we should review the ways that other jurisdictions have dealt with this.
Isn't it the case that
I'm an unabashed advocate of.
No, I know you are. I know you are.
Yeah.
I'm trying to steer a narrow course because I don't want to provoke a highly charged discussion today because we don't have time. But I do want to note that I think it belongs on the agenda. Go ahead, Sandra.
But my understanding is that in NYCHA, if your income goes up, you pay 30%, whatever your income is, right? So that's so you have a model of how they deal with the issue that you're raising, Jim, of in the city. You just got to keep reporting your income.
Yeah, we need to look at how effectively that's enforced, but
well, it's a rule, right?
But also, if you apply that to all of rent stabilization, the biggest program we have in the city, 1 million homes, right, are not means tested.
They were, they were before 2019. Exactly,
No, they weren't.
I live in rent stabilization rules. They were.
The HUD inspector
over a certain income, you lost the apartment.
How was that enforced?
The HUD inspector general.
You had to do your tax. You had to let them know what your taxes were
every year.
Yeah,
after, yeah, I forgot when, you know.
But
how it
periodically.
fit in. Yeah, as soon as your income, as soon as your rent went up above a certain, whatever it
Yeah.
was. And then they had the right to, check your income.
Yeah,
And
okay.
if you went above it, you just lost the apartment. That was.
Go ahead, your hand has been up.
The other aspect of this too is when people's income falls because of disability or aging, inability
It's true.
to work. So I do think that NYCHA model makes sense to
Yeah.
make the rent
Mhm.
proportional to the income.
And that's what we
Both
talked about, right?
directions.
That's what we talk about rent burden, anything over 30%.
just-
Go ahead,
Just so
Jim.
you know, the HUD Inspector General, IG, did a review a number of years ago. It's probably close to 10 years ago when I first started, or later started advocating for this. And the HUD AG found that a number of NYCHA residents were well over income, and that there was basically no enforcement. There was one instance where somebody had a household income of, I think it was $400,000 number. I think, Rich, I sent that to you a while ago.
Yeah, I did,
The HUD
and
IG.
we talked about that in a meeting in the summer.
Yeah.
So, all right, we'll leave this on the agenda too. And if no one objects, I would like to move on because we have some business we have to do. But Jim, thank you for showing up and being part of
Yeah.
that.
Yeah, I'm gonna listen in for the rest of it.
Sure, Sandra.
I'm interested in this good cause eviction issue. I don't know where we're headed. Are we gonna continue with what we would like to do? Or-
Yeah, well,
I could ask.
yeah, go ahead.
Ask in Senator Kruger's office, somebody come and talk to us
That
about
would be,
how they've analyzed it, and then we could go from there.
yeah, I
If
think,
you wanna do it.
no,
don't-
I do actually, because I think our action item is figure out what we think is broken about the bill that they passed, which we can get advice from Senator Kruger's office, and then push for a fix
Yeah, so-
via resolution.
So I can just contact.
Yeah,
them
that'd
and
be
see if
terrific.
Somebody come in to give a talk.
That'd be
I don't know- I
terrific.
don't know do you guys wanna do that?
No,
You fellows, you people, I'm not gonna do you guys. It's disgusting.
I think that'd be good.
Yeah, yes,
Sure.
the rest of you guys?
Sure,
Okay. good.
Yeah.
I
be
didn't-
consistent,
Yeah,
guys, no
No, you
guys.
can't, it's like a
Folks-
nature. I can't
Folks is
stop.
good,
folks is safe.
yeah.
Folks
Yeah.
is safe. It's, you have to train yourself though. I work in an environment where people try to be careful
We're
and,
good.
okay, I would like to move on to the second agenda item, which is the public hearing rules regarding the siting of homeless shelters. And the background here is that a year and a half, 2 years ago, it might be 3 at this point, we had a spate of emergency homeless shelters open in our district that we got no notice of. Or we were formally notified like 48 hours before they opened. And we passed a resolution. And as a result, the office got a lot of public blowback, and we as a committee got a lot of public blowback because people felt like they weren't consulted. The office had no information, so the office was like, "Well, we don't know what you expect us to do. We weren't notified either." And the city's not required to consult the public before citing shelters, and so they didn't. We objected to this in a resolution that we passed. What was the date of this? 2022, Brendan?
This was, yes, February 2022.
So boy, time is moving way faster than I thought. Yeah.
It is.
Yeah, it was the fall of 2021 that this was all happening. And we objected to this and asked the city to establish a notice period and an opportunity for public comment. And it looks like we're getting it. DHS has proposed new rules that would require a 14-day notice and a public hearing or a formal public comment opportunity before new shelters could be cited, and also consulting community boards on proposed siting locations that they should look at. It's my personal feeling that this is good, that we got something that we wanted, and that it would be good for us to formally endorse it as a board. But I would like to open it to discussion because I don't want to just push that through. Yeah.
Yeah, I would question whether it would make siting shelters more difficult.
Well-
And kind of, put them, have them be sited in places where people are less powerful.
Well, there are three things that mitigate. One is they're still required to follow fair share regulations that that obligate facilities like that to be distributed around the city. So that's one. Two is they are not obligated to accept public comment. I mean, ultimately, the decision is still up to DHS. So even if they get pushed back, they can still proceed. And three, these public comment rules are waived in specific emergency situations. If a state of emergency is in effect, which was the case during COVID, where the city was formally allowed to suspend some of the notification and contracting requirements that are normally in effect. So, we also know that in our district, DHS has not been afraid to cite shelters. So certainly we don't have to worry that we will, that our district will be able to talk them out of new facilities. Sandy, sorry.
So is this just shelters or there's a safe havens, there are various levels?
I think it's all of the facilities that DHS establishes, yeah.
I can pull up the notice in a moment that the office got just to see if for specifics. Just hold on.
Stand by, all.
Rich, I have my hand up online. If I could just add some.
Oh, sorry, go ahead and speak.
Yeah, I also want to add some context to what you said, Rich. So back in 2020, when I was chair, this was obviously when everything hit ahead. And we had sent several letters to the commissioner from 2020 to this resolution. So this resolution is actually the result of several outreach attempts to DHS to amend their policy, which was honestly a lack of communication with the public. They would hide their hearing dates in the city register, which no one reads. So a lot of people from the public would come to the community board assuming that we had some sort of approval process over this. This idea of of public backlash or creating some sort of process that would allow people to say no was something that we considered when discussing this resolution 2 years ago. The idea was that in either situation, you're going to get public backlash. But the idea of front loading that public backlash where there's maximum transparency and an actual discussion and still, a proper vote or decision-making process by the city as to why they're making this particular site a shelter was something that we thought would actually benefit the community rather than sort of creating an environment where no one knows who the decision maker is, when these decisions are made, what the process is. And as part of this decision, there's something called a fair share analysis. And that was one of our biggest criticisms, was that the fair share analysis that had been provided to us after the fact was actually riddled with a lot of inaccuracies and lack of information. In some cases, they had forgotten or improperly counted the number of shelters that we had in our district, and our district has one of the highest congestion rates of shelters. So creating some sort of process where the city has to be responding to the community with a fair share analysis gives the opportunity for anyone who's upset to direct those criticisms or concerns directly to the decision maker rather than coming to a community board, several months after, assuming that we have some sort of sway or power in where the shelters are cited. And that's an important thing. The city can just cite a shelter wherever they want, as long as they're in agreement with the landlord of that particular space. So I think this is good news and the result of a lot of our community board action. But whether we decide to support it or not, there's always an opportunity in the resolution to create suggestions for how to best improve the plan that they've shared with us.
Yeah, I want to note that public comment for this ends on December 4th, which means we will not be able to pass a resolution in full board in support of it. If we want to support it, we could agree in this committee to propose to executive committee that the community board send a letter of support, which if the executive committee endorses it next week, we will be able to do. So I want to put that on the table as a possibility.
I wanted to respond to also what Kyle said.
Sure, go ahead.
I just remember being at those meetings where the community members would sort of find out, and then they come to the meeting, and there was a tremendous sense of the closed door quality to it.
Yeah.
I didn't think that helped community relations at all. And it was very polarizing. So the idea of fair share, making this an open discussion really has to happen.
Yeah.
Because it, it just alienates community members, so.
And the idea is that it's going to happen anyway. So the idea of creating some
Yeah.
sort of public process to have a space for it is what we'd always been advocating for. Because in many cases, sometimes the public knew more than us, because either they lived next door to the proposed shelter site, or had the means to hire lawyers. In many cases in 2020, there are people who are coming to me with legal data of where who owns the spaces and what their leases are and things that we weren't even privy to. So I think this is not only helpful for the way that we manage this committee and the board, but also for the public, which again is what we had advocated for in that resolution 2 years ago.
And I would just like to say that if I never have to moderate any more of those meetings that are swarmed by angry people, I will be fine with that.
The guidance for fair share analyses was the Giuliani era thing, so it's almost 3 decades old.
Yeah.
It's probably in need of revision.
Which is a whole other topic.
One of the things that we had actually suggested in that was that people don't live their lives in cookie cutter districts. So many people who were complaining to us are people who lived on the border of one community board district and another, where just for argument's sake, say like the max is 5 shelters in a vicinity. They were living on a border where it was 5 in one district and 5 in another district. So in reality, in your everyday life, you're actually surrounded by 10, not 5. And the fair share analysis that we had received were really, really shoddy. They were not well-written documents, and that was the biggest concern for us, is that the whole document that you are utilizing to make the statistical argument for why a certain shelter should be sited in a certain place was riddled with inaccuracies. And there was no opportunity to contest that in a public domain. There was no way to check that or to have that be part of a decision-making process. So I'm very in support of this proposal. And of course, we can add things to make it better if we so choose to.
Well, I mean, is the sense of this group that we would like to endorse this? And ask the executive committee to
How
endorse
does it compare to what the community board originally asked for 3 years ago?
Well, we asked for public notice, advance notice.
Okay.
We asked for public input,
Mhm.
And it includes both of those.
Mhm.
We also asked for more accurate fair share data,
Okay.
which this doesn't address.
Yeah, and that probably won't happen
Yeah.
for a while anyway.
Yeah.
Okay.
Why would that not happen? The fair share.
I mean, it hasn't been, it's a Giuliani era sort of policy, and the guidance for a fair share analysis was laid out in the mid to late 90s, and it hasn't changed since.
Well, I mean, we want the guidance to be updated, but we also want them to do
Right.
what they.
And I mean,
formally supposed to do.
and the guidance hasn't been changed since 94, 6,
Yeah.
whenever it was
Yeah.
created.
Yes, I think there are 2 things here. The first thing is one topic completely separate is the idea of fair share analysis. The second thing is within the system that includes a fair share analysis is that they had inaccurate data. So I think one way that can actually be addressed is through a public transparency process, where if that is released to the public and people say, well, they forgot these shelters, or they, looked at the wrong, area, or whatever it might be, that can be brought up during this public hearing process, whatever.
Go ahead.
Yeah, so there's inaccuracies in the data, and it's being done by DHS, is that who's doing?
Yeah.
So that's not fair, that's,
Yeah.
whatever.
It's
it is.
the
We
not
were
fair analysis. Yeah.
That's ridiculous. Right? So, what it should be in there is a neutral party does the analysis. Maybe CUNY has I don't know if they've got a department that works on that, or Furman, the Furman Center, So you put in there that the department that is being evaluated cannot evaluate itself. It has to be done by a neutral third party, and you can name them.
The challenge with regard to that is that some of these facilities, locations are not public for public safety reasons. So I don't know if you could have an outside party do it.
Well, it's not even, that's not even the issue. The issue is that they're not evaluating themselves, they're evaluating sites. So it's like any other process, right? It's like a state liquor authority evaluating applicants to have a liquor license. So, you know, like that's the role of the agency. But the thing is, like, they should be held to higher standards. If they produce a report that is riddled with inaccuracies, the community should be upset about that and be able to have a venue where they can say, how can you, you know, cite a certain shelter if all of the information you're basing it on is faulty? And that should be part of that discussion. So that's what I hope it does. I hope that these hearings actually have teeth to them, that they're not just sort of ceremonial.
Should we endorse the new regulations with the provision that the data that drove the citing decision, including the formal fair share analysis, be publicized in advance?
Yeah, I agree. Yeah, I mean, that was our whole ask, was that all of these things
Yeah.
should be real to us before a decision is made. So the original resolution was that if there's a particular shelter site that the city is interested in, before actually having those negotiations with the landlord or whoever it might be, to actually come before the, you know, in this hearing process and say, we are thinking about that, you know, this particular site, or we're
Yeah.
choosing 3 different sites, and these are the reasons for each of them, which is produced in this document that we just published, the fair share analysis. And, you know, part of the meeting today is to hear from the public before we choose to contract with that particular landlord or space. So that is what we had asked for 2 years ago.
Okay, Sandy, do you have something?
Just that we do live in a system where negotiations with landlords can be very contentious. So if you're saying that you have to have that ahead of time, does not affect the negotiation with the landlord. So
Well,
suddenly the city could be paying exponentially more for the site because it was agreed to.
I mean, I was just thinking of the statistical data that justified the citing,
Yeah,
but
but maybe not that they reveal the site to us because we have to choose between these 3 sites. Like we need, they have to have some capability to negotiate.
so what are you proposing that?
It's just the data that they use, that makes some sense.
Yeah.
It's, you know, if it's private data that that we can't see because of privacy issues, then they can state that as well.
Yeah.
So at least we know. why.
Okay.
Couldn't you
And I
just
will
say
say part of,
Well, that you don't have to reveal the actual site, but there's a proposal within the
Because if
district.
it's in CD6,
Yeah.
everybody in CD6 is gonna come and complain about, maybe not, but then nobody may show up because, oh, it's in CD6, it's a big district.
Yeah.
You know,
Yeah.
there's,
and I'll just add that to this too, is that the sort of landmark case for this was the Renwick Hotel in 2020.
Triggering time.
Yeah, exactly. And no, and Rich, you were the vice chair at the time, and you know that was one of the reasons we really were, you know, strong on this stuff, was that the Renwick Hotel, the city had chosen the Renwick Hotel and said that they were going to open a shelter there, and obviously there's a lot of public backlash. But independent of the public backlash was the fact that the landlords of the actual hotel did not know that the city had planned to use it as a shelter. So this actually might even improve the negotiations of the city with, you know, different stakeholders, because that's actually why it ended up not happening at all, was because the landlord was not okay with this, you know, site being used as a shelter. So they had actually felt misguided by the city itself and were surprised by this backlash, because the city had never even informed the landlords during their negotiations that the whole reason the city wanted to rent it out or utilize it was for a homeless shelter. So, you know, there's a lot, I think, that needs an improvement that I think would be benefited by this type of process.
Do we have a consensus of this group that we would ask the executive committee to endorse this with the provision that statistical fair share data be disclosed in advance?
I'm supportive of that.
I'm just looking around the room to see, we definitely have a majority of nods, of the people here. I don't think we need for this a formal resolution because we're asking the executive committee to consider it.
We're asking the executive committee to do a resolution.
Well, I mean, we're asking the executive committee to write a letter.
We already have a resolution asking for this, so.
Correct. This is endorsing the response. So,
Of a resolution.
so that's, we are resolved as a committee. Thank you. I know we're at an hour, but there are a few new business items that I want to raise. One of them was going to be good cause, but you came prepared with your handouts, and we don't have to do that one. There are four things. One, I want to mention that two things the mayor announced today regarding homelessness. The shelter limit is going to be extended by 30 days for families with children in elementary school to reduce disruption to the school, to their schooling, which is good. They also, the mayor said they were going to establish a central address that people in the shelter system could use to ensure that they got their mail even as they moved locations, which is also good. So that's one thing I wanted to mention. Another one is the proposed proposal in the city council to essentially re-legalize Airbnb in smaller buildings to allow people in 1 and 2 unit buildings to rent their units out. I think we oppose that as a group, but I'm not sure. I don't know if we're on record. So that's something that is on the city council agenda. I don't think it's moving very fast, unless do you have other information?
No, I'm very curious. It's the first that I've read. And I have a real slumlord who's played fast and loose with all the departments, sometimes for families, sometimes for businesses instead of residential and Airbnb.
So we should, so that's something we should look into for next time. The third thing is a quick one with mandatory composting starting and containerization for small apartment buildings of 10 units or less. Do we have any sense of how well that's working? I mean, my anecdotal response to composting, to my surprise, is that my building just got the bins and set them up with no issues, and the one bin wasn't enough, so they got 3 more, and now there are 4. You know, a building of 200 units. I thought they wouldn't, but people are using them.
My only question is, does this displace any of the automatic receptacles in the street?
They haven't said. I'm guessing that eventually they probably will take those down.
It's a shame.
Yeah.
If you want to find out data rather than just us.
Yeah.
Couldn't we have on the website, something like, is your building doing
You want
composting?
to collect? Are you
Yeah,
saying you're
collect
gonna
it.
survey?
Yeah, collect, use the website,
Newsletters?
collect the data, so, right, because otherwise we get yourself. Can we do that? Is that a reasonable?
You say that again?
Use the website, use the
A
CB
poll, a
website.
survey,
What?
a poll, a survey.
Yeah, well, the issue is composting in fact being.
Yeah, are people
instituted
complying?
in their
Are you, is it a
apartment
pain?
buildings.
We should check the sanitation committee and make sure that they're not
Yeah, well,
already.
that's what you think the health,
Do you-
one of those, but if not, can we put that on the website? We'd like you to respond, and then we have a category.
I'll bring up the request with Jesus. I know Jesus is a little bit leery about overclogging the website because
Yeah, no,
in the
yeah.
past, like there'd be this, that, and the other on the website.
We could definitely put a notice in the newsletter saying if you're having issues with your building, let us
Yeah,
know.
that absolutely we can do.
But then you've only got the negatives and not the positives, and you want to get a
Filter
face.
framing,
Huh?
you can
Yeah.
say, what do you think about composting?
Well,
Give people.
you want to know, is
You always
composting
can
going
get
on in your
more
building?
negative.
Yes or no? That's all,
I
very
think people don't
straightforward.
bitch.
Yeah, so let's you and I coordinate on this.
Well, it would be helpful to get the negatives.
There is one other thing that I want to raise, and that is the public safety conditions near First Avenue and East 14th Street, which has come up before. As some of you may be aware, I got punched in the face on the platform of the L train near the Avenue A entrance by a disturbed person. I was knocked out for about 3 seconds. And recovered. I had a mild concussion. It took me a few days to recover. My black eye is gone. But it was a reminder that, I'm a big, intimidating looking person, and I saw the fellow and I walked toward a crowd of people, and it didn't help me. My experience of what's going on in the area is that the police have finally dealt with disorder at the sidewalk level, but it's not clear that they've dealt with it in a way that is accommodating the needs of the people who were hanging out in the area. Stu wants us to come up with a coordinated approach to this issue between our committees and other committees, and also to make sure that all of the city agencies that are involved should be involved. I just wanted to mention this because I'm probably going to talk to him about ways that we might be able to work with other committees.
Well, obviously, I would recommend looping in LV and health, especially because of the mental health component.
Yep.
To find out whether or not the proximate services of that area are at all overwhelmed.
Yeah.
Recently closed. If there's anything that makes it more target-rich environment.
It's complicated by the fact that it is a police precinct border, 14th Street is, and a community district border. So like everything is split, and it's a business improvement district border, I think. It's all a mess. We had a call with Department of Homeless Services 6 months ago about this, and they agreed that it was an issue and it was hard to corral all of the agencies. Since then, the police presence increased, but basically just putting those big 24-hour lights on the sidewalk is not enough to address the problem.
We had the issue this morning where 2 people were killed and one of them was in Kips Bay.
Yikes.
How?
Wow,
Yeah.
one's in serious condition.
What happened?
Yeah,
Yeah,
and
so.
3 people were stabbed.
Yeah, there are 3 people stabbed, one on the west side in Chelsea, one person at the water, like at 500 East 30th Street where the water club is, that person was killed.
Yes.
Like the victim was killed there. And then at East 42nd Street by First Avenue, or by First Avenue, East 42nd Street by Tripoli Plaza, the person who was stabbed there was critically injured and is.
It was the same.
Was the assumption
Same
the same
attacker.
person?
Yeah, same attacker for all 3, the thing in Chelsea and then the 2 in our district, and the suspect has been arrested. But that happened today.
And they were residing at the 30th Street and then Shell.
They were?
On the 30th Street and then Shell.
Yeah.
There's no action item. I just wanted to bring that up. I would like to move us to a close, but I see we have 2 members of the public whose hands have been up, and I want to invite them to speak for a minute if they want to. The first one is Julie Friedman. Brendan, if you could give her permission to speak.
Hi, thank
Hi,
you so much.
Julie.
Hi, thank you. First, Rich, I'm sorry that you got whacked, and that's terrifying. I just had 2 comments. The first is, Kyle, I am so grateful that all of the hundreds of hours that I spent filing in that homeless shelters and how our specific neighborhood to other districts, you heard the message. So I'm really appreciative that, you absorbed the hundreds of hours of work that 29th Street neighborhood said to you. And I think that's fantastic. The other comment is sort of a larger comment. And this goes back to a comment, Rich, that you just made and Sandy made. I know you are volunteers. I know that you always put your best efforts forward. But the comment right now about the community complaining about the homeless shelters that just appeared overnight without any input it's not insulting, it's demeaning. It's saying that the community isn't as important as your board and your decisions. My intent was never to complain to you. It was to make awareness. Often I was notifying you people about the shelters that were coming. But it's the attitude that the board would even think that we're complaining. you're as a committee, you're supposed to be representing CB6. And as a taxpayer, as somebody who cares deeply about her neighborhood and keeps her sidewalks clean and plants flowers, I am allowed to live in harmony and peace. And it's very upsetting to hear that people on the board are only caring about the shelters. And these are people who are coming from outside the community. We've already addressed that 96% or 98% of the shelter residents aren't Community Board 6. So I'd like you just to serve as a reminder, a meta awareness, that it's very important that when we go through these decisions, you represent us. You're our voice. And if our voice is demeaned, then I have no business coming to any community board meetings or caring about my neighborhood, and I might as well pack up and move to a different district. So yes, I was very disappointed. But Rich, I was really very disappointed. The complaints weren't to you. It was, you are our voice. And if you felt that they were complaining and Sandy only cares about people who have low income or no income, I actually care about the entire community. But I am here speaking about the people who pay taxes. And I need to know that the 4 shelters that I have within 4 blocks, 98% of the time, 99% of the time, there's actually quiet. But these are not good neighbors. Make no mistake, these are not good neighbors. So I need to know that you people are advocating on behalf of us, and you're our allies. You're not our enemies. And that's why I was so grateful to hear Kyle's wisdom absorbed our message. And 14 days is not enough for DHS to notify you. At that point, they've already signed the contracts. Okay. And it's not about pre-negotiation. I know from being in real estate, as soon as DHS comes to you with the location, no matter what they say, it's après Inc. They already have signed a 9-year lease on these locations.
Julie, I want to stop you and tell you that I accept the criticism. And I personally took a lot of abuse.
Never from me.
No,
please,
not from you.
I've always respected you. Yes,
you were very helpful in this process because you came with data. So that was useful. Your comments are on the record and appreciated. And from my perspective, I will try to make sure that everyone is accommodated.
I just want this committee, as well as all other committees, to remember this isn't a personal directive. This is, we need to think united and more global, right?
Yeah, I agree with you.
If we keep getting shelters dumped in our neighborhood, 14 days is not notice. Okay. But if we keep getting shelters dumped in our neighborhood and onto PS 116 and onto the food shelters and the list goes on, we want everyone being housed, but we got to put our community members first.
Mm-hmm. All right. Thank you for.
Thank you. That was my comment.
No, it's fine. Thank you for coming so thoughtfully to it. And I think we need to break now because we've run far beyond the time that I promised. Do we still have? We still have 2 more. Sure. Let's go with Gail first. Stand by, Gail.
Okay.
Are you on? Is that you? Yes, we can hear you.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Great. I live in Sutton Place on 56th Street, and I've been here for over 20 years. And, it's a wonderful neighborhood. The only problem is we do have a homeless man who has been on First Avenue right in front of Duane Reade for the last, I would say, over a month now. I called 311 a month ago. They sent someone from the homeless shelter or services, and they spoke to the man who refused to leave. And so they closed the complaint. And I didn't think it was going to, get solved, but I've decided to call again today because when I was out yesterday, I noticed he now has all of these bags, and his little area has gotten bigger and bigger. He's got all kinds of garbage bags and so forth. And he's sitting there on the sidewalk in front of Duane Reade.
Yeah,
Near the bus stop. And I think it's a shame that this man is not taken to a shelter. And why is he just left there because he refuses to go? Would you
it
please
is, it,
tell me what?
it is appropriate for you to make those complaints. And you may be able to get help from the community board office.
Yeah.
Brendan?
In fact, this is Brendan, the assistant district manager. So yes, you're actually not the first person to bring this issue to the community board.
Okay.
CB6 has been working with the Department of Homeless Services to try and offer services to the individual. The challenge sometimes is that oftentimes the individuals refuse services. One other thing that we are trying to do is we hear that there is some scaffolding over by where the unhoused individual is. And that scaffolding can act as a bit of a shelter. So we're also trying to work with the property owner to try and hopefully make sure the work at that location gets completed so that the scaffolding goes down. That also would potentially address this issue.
Okay. Well, thanks to both of you, and I'm glad that this is on your radar.
It very much is.
We have one more hand, and that's Madeline Tedesco, and we're gonna give you permission to unmute, and hopefully you can still hear us.
Can you hear me? Yeah, you
Yeah,
can.
there.
Right. Yeah, no, that wasn't a question. I was going back to the affordable housing. I thought salaries were reviewed, but I guess not, right?
Well, I mean, there's some uncertainty about how often they're rechecked.
Yeah.
But that is something that we're going to look into.
Yeah, because you know the program SCREE.
No.
Yeah, senior citizen rent increase exception. Yeah, well, if you apply for SCREE every year, you have to resubmit that application. And with that, you put your income and all of that. But although I think for affordable housing, 1 year is unreasonable, but maybe 5 years, because what that man, Jim Collins, mentioned, that's outrageous. If someone's making 400,000, they should not be in affordable housing.
Yeah. All right. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you.
And I'm now going to entertain a motion to adjourn.
Motion to adjourn.
Is there any objection? No objection. Thank you all for coming. Thank you, those of you online, for joining, and we will see you next month.